Welcome to the first episode of Local Legends powered by GoLocal Quote. GoLocal Quote is an app which has over 1,000 small businesses and over 250 service categories. You submit a request in 3 steps and you get matched with small businesses right in your area.
And today we are blessed to get a very good guest for our first podcast, John Risley.
Like, comment, subscribe, comment who you want to see next. We're going to be bringing in a bunch of tycoons, a bunch of local legends, but we thought we'd kick it off with the basic legend of all, John Risley. Without further ado, check it out. Okay, Local Legends, this is episode 1. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Matt Rohrbeck.
Thomas Sutherland.
And we are very excited to announce in our first episode that we are joined by an award-winning serial entrepreneur, John Risley. John, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, John, we're going to get right into it. In your world of business, in the last 10 years, how have you seen things change? And moving forward in the next 10 years in Atlantic Canada, what big changes do you see coming and what opportunities does that present?
Well, lots of great questions resident in that intro. So has there been dramatic change? Yeah, you guys, as I look at you, are not old enough to remember the world without cell phones. But my first trip to Europe, research was done in telephone booths where you looked at the yellow pages to figure out who your potential customers were. And all communication was by payphone or when you got to a hotel room. Again, a world without technology involved things like, we're trying to start a perishable business and move stuff around, and logistics supply chains as we know them today didn't exist. Airlines had no experience doing business, had no computer systems, right? This was pre-computers. So the receiving end of an airplane cargo hold, nobody knew, let's say in Munich or London or Paris, what was in the hold of the airplane till they actually opened the door, right? And they got a cargo manifest which told them what was in the hold of the airplane, and then what connections they might have to use for the freight that was there to move it on to its ultimate destination, right? So we had to invent that whole logistics chain. We had to make sure people on the ground in Paris, if that was where our product was moving through, knew that there was going to be seafood on board that had to be moved to the next available connection to Munich, so we could get them, ready to do that rather than have the stuff sit on the tarmac in the hot sun all day long before somebody figured out, hey, this is perishable and we got to get it on a flight to, so and so, right? And the first big technology change, you guys will laugh when you hear this, was in 1980. Xerox invented the Xerox machine, right? Which enabled us to, at that moment in time, you say, well, what was the big deal? The big deal was that all our stuff had to clear customs, had to have health certificates attached to it. So how you did that was you just put stuff on a box, right? You actually taped it on a box. And if something happened to the tape on the box and the invoices came off during the course of, people throwing the boxes around the hold of an airplane or transferring them to carts and that sort of thing, then there were no documents, right? And you had no way of getting documents to anybody, and other than the airlines in those days. Again, you won't remember this, had a special service where you could actually deliver something to an airport and transport, but that was incredibly expensive and didn't often work. So, the FedExes and the UPSs and the DHLs as we know them today did not exist, right? And you guys are shaking your head and saying, no, that can't be. Well, that was absolutely the case. So, building a business that depended on a really efficient logistics supply chain, if you like, and infrastructure, meant that you had to build that infrastructure. And the way we did that was to physically go around to all the airports that we were focused on sort of using as gateways into Europe, and giving all the freight guys free lobster dinners and making ourselves into good guys that were deserving of their help and support, and that really worked. I mean, I often think that if we were in the widget business and didn't have a product that was as sort of appealing, the only other thing that might have been appealing in those days was marijuana, right? If we were shipping marijuana around, which a lot of people suspected we were, that lobsters were just a cover for the fact that we were really in the weed business. And uh, uh, then that might have got us, if you like, the same support that we were able to get by offering people free lobster parties and that sort of thing. But anyway, what your point was around how's the technology changed? Well, hopefully that gives you an indication, if you like. I mean, you don't think anything now of sending anything around the world. And what do you mean I can't get it there in 24 hours? Of course I can, right? And I've got lots of options to do so, and it's no big deal. Well, it was a big deal 50 years ago, right?
Yeah. So what, like, in terms of if you're starting a business now, what would a big opportunity be that you see kind of moving forward?
Well, I mean, you can ask one of the chat agents to, you can feed in a basic idea and you can ask the chat to write you a business plan, right? And we should be so lucky. You can even ask the chat, for a business like this, can you give me a name of potential angel or early stage investors, right? And we didn't have anything like that, right? So what's my assessment is that it is easier to start a business today than it ever has been, but it's also a lot more competitive than it ever has been.
So if you were looking back at 22-year-old self, which is our age right now, would you have like any advice for yourself or any ideas that you feel like you'd be able to pursue?
Yeah, look, several ideas. The first is go for it. You're going to learn a lot more working for yourself than you're going to work for somebody else, and that doesn't mean there's anything wrong or stigma attached to going and work for someone else. There's nothing wrong with this idea that I want to start my own business, but I want to go work for, a consulting company, or I want to work for an investment bank, or I want to do this, or I want to do that for a couple of years before I start my own business. Totally cool. In fact, in many ways, that's a great idea. Uh, uh, One of the things that we learned, because I hadn't been to university, um, and didn't really understand, if you like, the ethos of differentiation. But you need to really think through today more than ever. What is your point of difference? What are you doing that no one else in this space is doing? Uh, why are customers going to come to you? Is what you're offering something that is going to attract a premium price, right? Is there enough value in what it is you're offering to be able to warrant you getting, a higher price than what the market is paying for a similar product or service? And then I think you've got a new challenge today, which is new in the last 10 years, is you've got to think through how AI is going to disrupt the business segment in which you're proposing to compete, right? What is going to happen? Now, if I was going to build a port, for instance, just to give you a bizarre example, or I was going to build a wind farm, or I was going to build an electric transmission line, or I was going to build a railway, or I was going to build a road. I'm just trying to think of examples. I wouldn't worry so much about AI disrupting my business, right? But if I was going to get into any kind of a service business, right, then I would really worry about, okay, today, I mean, look at what's happened in the software industry in the last literally 6 months, right? Where now people are worried that latest large language models are actually going to be able to write their own software, thereby eroding the value of everybody that's in the software space. And so my point is that you really have to think through, okay, is what I'm doing capable of being materially disrupted by AI? And if so, can I be the disruptor, right? Can I do something using AI that no one else is doing and actually change the nature of the industry or the segment of the economy in which I'm hoping to compete? Because that's what you have to worry about today, which you didn't have to worry about now. As I say, if you're building, a piece of physical infrastructure, if you're doing something that, if you're a guy who's a pipe fitter or an electrician or a welder, do you have to worry about AI? I think you got to worry about robotics, right? But technical skills, blue collar skills, uh, those kinds of things, I think are well, we know they're hugely in demand today, and there's business opportunities around the provision of those kinds of services. They're not likely to be disrupted by AI over the course of the next, call it 5 or 10 years. In fact, in many ways, to the extent that AI is going to grow the economy, grow the consumption of electricity, for instance, you can imagine, okay, uh, because AI is going to change this segment or that segment, how do I invest in that change, right? Uh, and ride that wave, if you like, because it's very difficult for businesses today to change their business model, especially big companies. One of the reasons why I've got such huge respect for a guy like Jensen Huang, who's the CEO, as you know, of NVIDIA, is that most people won't be aware, is that he changed that business completely over 3 times over the course of the last, let's call it, 35 years, right? That's really hard to do. Now it's the world's most valuable company, but he completely changed the direction of that business, the focus on what it was doing, the customer set, its technology platform. And as I say, very hard to do. Most companies just simply go out of business, right? When they're faced with change. And if you want an example of that, go ask Chat what were the 10 most valuable companies, let's call it 50 years ago, and the world, and apart from ExxonMobil, which I don't think really makes it today into the top 10, none of those 10 companies are in that top 10 list today. So it just shows you how dramatic change is, how aware of change you have to be, how you have to think through it. Where am I in that curve? Am I likely to be disrupted by change? Can I play a role in that change? Or can I, build a construction business that's got a bunch of backhoes and go out and dig holes? And because we're still going to be digging holes 5 years and 10 years and 20 years from now.
Yeah. So, John, you used the word disruptive a few times, and I feel like in the seafood industry, you've kind of been a pioneer in that industry. Was there any moment where, as you were going along, was there a specific moment that you can share with us and the listeners where you thought, all right, well, I think this is going to start to work?
Yeah, absolutely. Several moments, and it's all about learning the industry and learning where the opportunities are. And we started in the business knowing nothing, my brother-in-law and I, and all we really had was a capacity to, or willingness or desire to work hard. And we worked really hard, couldn't work any harder physically for, let's call it, a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And I mean, literally 7 days a week, as many hours in the day as we could possibly stay awake. We often slept right at the shop or store we had. And I sort of woke up one day and I said, look, we can't work any harder than we're working, right? So what the hell are we going to do? Because this isn't delivering the kinds of results that we had aspired to. So I went off to something called the Small Company Management Program at a school in Boston, and learned some of the basic principles around business, like differentiation, service differentiation, and we sort of we sensed then that we weren't going to be able to grow a business doing the same thing everybody else was doing, because if you're new in a business and you're going to do everything the same as everyone else is doing, what do you have to do to get traction? You have to do 2 things. You have to pay more and you have to sell for less. And that's usually not a particularly good recipe for profitability, right? Which is exactly what we were doing. We were paying more to get product and we were selling for less to sell it. Nobody needed us. So how do you rethink the business uh, and this idea of differentiation and providing a level of service quality that didn't exist in the industry at that time was appealing to us. And I remember getting on a plane and in the late 1970s and going off and spending 3 weeks in Europe, and that was just a huge commitment on my part. I, spending 5 minutes away from the office to take the bank deposit to the bank was a big sacrifice because it meant I was away from the telephone and away from any ability to communicate, right? And I hated that. And so going away for 3 weeks was a big deal. And obviously, I had my brother-in-law back and at the shop who was looking after things, and he and I had a great relationship, and I could completely trust in him sort of managing things while I was away. And then literally, I would just go from city to city and phone book to phone booth to phone booth and figure out who was in the seafood distribution business and in those cities and tear the yellow pages out of the telephone books and the telephone books and then go around and see people, right? And everybody sort of said the same thing, which was, look, Canadians, you got great product, but you don't provide us with any commitments around quality. You've got stuff at certain times of the year, but you don't have it year round. And so what we want is we want the same quality year round, and we want service year round. So, uh, we were naive enough to sort of say, yeah, no problem, we'll fix that. And that's, we'll do just that without having really any idea as to how we were going to do it. But I remember coming back with a sense of, okay, that's our opportunity to grow a company, right? We got to figure out how to do that because there's lots of demand out there for a level of service that wasn't currently on offer. And we could see, okay, we don't have to sell for less anymore. We can actually maybe sell for more if we can attach these sorts of attributes, if you like, to what it was that we were selling, which we'll always have product. It'll always be good quality, and we'll be in business 365 days a year. So that's a sort of you have to, in any business, if you like, even if you start off with a great business plan. We didn't, other than this desire to work hard. And if you've got a sophisticated business plan, you actually don't know whether or not it's going to work until you get that first customer. Yeah. And that customer endorses the service or the product you're offering. And then, so that's sort of an electric light moment. And the second electric light moment is when you get a reorder, right? When, yep, we're happy with what you did, or we're not happy, but if you fix this and that, we'll order again, kind of thing. Those are really the sort of moments where you get a lot of encouragement. And one of the things that I think is really, really important for any business in any segment of the economy is really building strong relationships with your customers so that you really understand what it is that they want and need. How can you help them grow their businesses? That's your responsibility as a supplier. How can I make my customer more money? And then how can I develop the kind of relationship with my customer that won't be just focused on price, right? Such that they are empathetic to the problems that we're having, the struggles that we're undertaking to deliver them what it is that they need to make more money, and so that they'll stick with us and do the kinds of things that you need as a young business, like don't be too hard on us. Pay your bills really quickly, like as fast as you possibly can, because we always need money, right? And having that kind of a relationship with your customers is enormously important to getting a business up and off the ground, as I say, whatever segment of the economy you're competing in.
Yeah, and that's kind of a stage we're in now too. We just launched a business, and we're kind of in the early stages where we're just starting to acquire customers now. And like you said, I think seeking feedback is so important when you're in those early stages. You like to think that you have all the answers and the best idea, but when you hear it from someone else who might not be biased towards your idea and you get their raw opinion, that's so valuable, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Cool.
So how would you like say it's invest or assessed a business if you're looking to work with them or it's in that case?
Yeah, I keep coming back to, okay, what are you doing differently uh, than other people who are operating in the same sort of area that you are? And uh, and is that what evidence do I have that what you're doing differently is appealing to the market, right? Show me evidence of your traction. Show me that customers are willing to endorse what you're doing and are willing to pay for it at a price point that can make you profitable, if not today, then at such point in time as you get to some degree of scale.
Yeah. So you need to see
Show me
results.
validation, right? Show me the technology works, right? Uh, I don't know how many times I've heard that, oh yeah, we're 80% of the way there. And when somebody tells you they're 80% of the way there, what they're really telling you is that we're not there and we really don't have any idea how many problems we've got to fix before we get there. That's what they're really telling you, right? 80% is just a guess. And usually the 80% is not 80%. Usually it's 20%.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. So I guess thank you so much for joining us. And our last question, this is called all centered around local business. So is there in Nova Scotia, is there a business that is your favorite local business that you have?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Look, what I'm really encouraged about in the region is the extent to which all the incubators, uh, whether it be uh, Cove over in Dartmouth or the incubators in Halifax, right across the whole region, right? I don't want to pick on one. They're all full, right? And the new business community is alive and well. It's hard if you can't raise money, you get booted out pretty quickly, but that's as it should be, right? Uh, and uh, and if I've got a hope for Atlantic Canada, it's resident in this idea that we can create more of the kinds of success stories that not Halifax hasn't spawned the kinds of successes that we've seen in St. John's, Newfoundland, for instance, right? Uh, with some of their spectacular multi-billion-dollar success stories, but we will, and we've had lots of successes. We've got a great battery lab here in Halifax at Dalhousie, run by Jeffrey Don. Has been a huge number of businesses that have come out of that lab. Batteries are a big deal today, as we all know. A lot of those companies have gone on to scale, and so that's an area of success. We've seen a lot of activity in the ocean sector because of all the ocean research that's done here. We're getting better at commercializing research. The small business community is learning how to raise money. There's more money available for investment in a small business community than there ever has been. So all the ingredients are there. And we'll have some real home runs, but I look at this not so much as a Nova Scotia issue. I look at it as a regional issue. We've always been seen as sort of this have-not area. We have to rely on support from the rest of the country, if you like, because we're not financially or economically self-sufficient. That's we are intellectually self-sufficient, but we need to turn that intellectual horsepower into commercial horsepower and grow the economy. And we've got, I think, now political leadership that understands the importance of growing the economy, and we're much more open to doing business in areas that were previously off limits, like fracking gas and mineral exploration, all of which were looked upon with a very sort of discouraging attitude for all sorts of legitimate reasons. But the world is fracking for natural gas, and this idea that we should import our natural gas because we don't want to frack here. What a stupid idea that is, right? If it's being fracked somewhere else, let's frack it here because we have it, and generate, some meaningful economic activity rather than supporting economic activity somewhere else. How dumb is that, right? There's only one environment, there's only one world, and this idea that, well, we're not damaging the environment because we're not doing it here. Well, it's being done somewhere else, right? So come on, let's do it here, and let's figure out how to do it in an environmentally responsible way so we can generate that economic activity here. And that attitude, I think, is finally taking root. And you're seeing evidence in that in the sort of political overtures that are being made to sort of say, hey, we are open for business.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more, John. We got to start boosting our economy and stop buying from the others. So couldn't agree more. Well, yeah, thank you, John, so much for joining us. This is the first episode of the Local Legends podcast presented by GoLocal Quote. And John, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Not at all, guys. Take care of yourself.